Wear Your Cape to Work is a podcast about professional project managers who are truly the superheroes at every organization. We want you to hear their stories to be inspired to wear your own cape to work. My guest today is Lindy Way Stenberg, a project manager on the PayPal marketing team. She has so many talents. She's been called the time ninja at work by several bosses and is a master of productivity. But showstopper, she also has incredible work-life balance. What? How do productive project manager types find balance? Today, she'll share about how she's developed these superpowers, being great at productivity, and also making time for pursuits outside of work. So make sure you bookmark this episode for when you're feeling like you're too deep in the grind. Thanks for joining us, Lindy Way.
Hi, Trina.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
It's good to have you here. I want to kick off and go right to Time Ninja because it's this term, that you even have on your LinkedIn profile. And by the way, I keep telling people on the podcast, you really need to put your superpowers on your LinkedIn profiles. But funny enough, all of our guests so far have had some of their superpowers on their LinkedIn profile, and yours is a good one up there. It's right up at the top, Time Ninja. So, how did you, when do you remember the first time that you were called a Time Ninja? Or are you calling yourself a Time Ninja?
No, it was a previous boss of mine. I was fairly new to the position, months in, I want to say, and she had asked me to do something. I was doing this very quick floor plan so that someone could see where we wanted to put something. And I already had a basic floor plan from something else. And so I just put it in there and kind of like copy pasted a lot of stuff. So it actually did not take very long, but she came by to ask me for something like, oh, I'm done. I sent it to you via email. And she's like, you're like a time ninja. Like, how do you do all the things and then do all the other things? And I was like, I don't know. It's just, you find ways to make it as fast and easy as possible. Like, I love working. Working is very important to me and who I am, but I don't like to work too hard so that I have that space for my own, interests outside of the job. And so I just really try to find ways as much as I can to narrow down the time it takes to do something. And so, yeah, there we go. And she walks by, time ninja.
She's yours. They put it over your door just then. Yeah. I think, do
Yeah.
you think, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've had other bosses say the same thing who don't know each other. So I don't know if it's
That's
a
funny.
word that someone made up and
Yes.
used it for other things, but seems to have followed me around.
Do you think that project managers in general have that same feeling about making things take as little time as possible? Is it always efficiency? I mean, is that a general project manager PMP style trait?
I think so. The folks that I know, especially in the PMILA group, where I'm a member and also volunteer, a lot of them are very much focused on, how can we do this at a cross section between doing it well and doing it efficiently in,
Mm-hmm.
a shorter amount of time. Definitely trying to not extend a timeline as much as possible while still, providing the project, as well done as possible. In order to get the project done and do more than one at a time, you really have to make sure that you are focused on that timeline and that it doesn't sort of stretch out too long.
Well, almost like what you're saying. I mean, I love the word efficient because it does sort of emit it's fast, but it's effective, right? There's that speed. But I think you're not sacrificing quality and yet you're not inflating, the needs that a project really has. So that cautiousness about inflating something beyond what was actually required is an interesting trait too. I think it's a superpower because you can get really caught in the weeds or you can, not cut to the chase. It's definitely a project manager skill.
Yeah, and I think it changes depending on the project, obviously. What the end goal is. Like if I was building a building, that's going to be a very different and process and where we can cut down timelines versus if I'm creating a marketing campaign. So
Right.
some things can be stacked, some things can't, some things have wiggle room, some things don't, some things we always know takes this many days. So I think it also depends on what project you're doing. But over time, I've definitely gathered more skills around sort of how much time things take and also making things more efficient. So maybe not something taught, but something learned.
Yeah, and you've had quite an interesting career path to where you are now. I mean, I did some reading, even from your profile, like we were talking about, that you started in design, which is no surprise, not surprising to end up in marketing when you have that design background. And that you found your way through events and lifestyle events planning, which is cool. We could talk about that today too. But I saw nursing in your background, and that seems like it develop some of those same time management, time ninja habits too. Do you see some of that, development in your history?
Yeah, it never ended up coming to fruition. I started a nursing degree, and realized that was not going to be something that would be good for myself or anybody else. So I stopped, but healthcare and science and those things have always been really interesting to me,
Hmm, interesting.
which is why I'm pursuing my master's degree focused a little bit more on healthcare marketing, like marketing in general, but definitely more in the
Right.
healthcare space.
Okay.
Um, so I feel like there was kind of a coming together of
Hmm.
my skills already in sort of project management without being a project manager. I didn't know anything about project management at that time, but
Mhm.
still definitely having projects to complete and figuring out how long things take and can we stack those things so they are happening at the same time versus end to end to end to end all the time. And that definitely helped, I think, a lot in the studying. So
Yeah.
studying science is
Yes.
so different than doing art all day and maybe
Mhm.
you know it was definitely a different side of my brain. I had to be very mindful of my time and how much I was focused on memorizing these things and then going on to a completely different subject and then studying
Right.
something else, even though it's all science. But if you're studying chemistry and chemistry formulas versus going into like anatomy and figuring out how all the muscles work together, like very different
Mm. Mhm.
but very different, subjects. So kind of trying to figure out how much time I needed to spend studying each subject, especially when you have more than one class at a time. I feel like a lot of my time management skills came into play there and probably were strengthened a little bit because I did fairly decently in school, even though I, never ended up actually getting my
Right.
nursing. So have thought about going back to school for something like healthcare administration. So we'll see. Once this master's done, I'll just get some more master's
Yeah,
degrees.
look at you. I can't believe it. You got a full-time job doing project management and you're getting your master's in an area that does, like you said, requires a lot of attention to the material and taking in new material. What would you say though? You mentioned a few paragraphs back that you were talking about, not knowing that you were going to head into project management, but knowing that you had these kind of skills. There's people out there that haven't ever considered project management as a career and maybe are listening even today, to the podcast wondering what is project management. Maybe they're trying to understand, how would you pick a project management professional? Who are the people that should maybe consider it? Is there a limit to, the skill set? Is it broad? Do you need all sorts of different project management types or do they all kind of fit in the same mold? What's your feeling about that?
I didn't know what project management was, as you mentioned. I remember I was working at my sort of very first corporate type job out of college. I was 20, young. And um, there was this gal, we were working with an agency to help us build out our website.
Okay.
And she was the project manager
Oh,
for
yes,
the agency
yes.
for us. And I remember her talking to me about some stuff about our overall, project with her. And she's like, "You seem like you would be a really good project manager. Have you ever thought about something like that?" And I was like,
Oh,
"What is that?" well, I don't
What
know what
is
that is.
that?
What is that? I thought her job was really cool. I'm like, you get to manage this whole thing. Like, you come up with the
Yeah.
timeline, the requirements, and you've created this like process document and you get sign offs and stuff. And that was pretty much what I did with my day most of the time anyway. I
Mhm.
just always had that um skill, I guess, just
Mhm.
that I can visualize, oh, this is how we get that thing done. And here's the people we need to ask to make sure that we have what we need in order to get the thing done. And here's the people we need to sign off. And here's how long I think this would take. And it just seemed very easy
Mhm.
to me to sort of create that
Mhm.
whole project and that project plan. And so when she said that, that's kind of when I started looking into it. I didn't really start into project management until my second corporate job, where I actually went and got my PMP and found the lovely
Mhm.
people at MILA and got really involved in volunteering, etc. So I think it's a little bit different probably for everybody, but I would say there that general project management I think can be applied anywhere. It's
Mhm.
really partly skill, but I think a little bit of kind of intuition on how best can I make this project work? Like there are definite steps,
Mhm.
there is work, there are guidelines, there's a list of things you could probably check off. But some of it is kind of just like and I think that part is an individual's part because the rest of it is definitely something that you can learn. If you know the main framework, everything else, whether you're in construction, you're in IT, you're in
Mm.
health, you're in creative, like all of that stuff you learn on the job. Because even though, maybe you work at an agency as a project manager, like a creative agency, that project plan that you create for them is going to be very different from what it might be like
Right.
in a corporate situation or for
Mhm.
construction.
Okay, so we've talked about you being a time ninja. And one of the questions that I had when we talked before was, if you're a time ninja, how can I convey this to our audience in the show to have them understand how they can maybe get some of those time ninja capabilities as well? And you said that you have a Gantt chart in your head. How does one actually see a Gantt chart in your head? And by the way, audience, if you also have a Gantt chart in your head, maybe you can comment on this episode because I know Lindy Way would like to know if anybody else sees things like this, but maybe you can explain how to envision projects or requirements or what your plan is as a Gantt chart as you kick off.
Yeah, a colorful Gantt chart, right? Everything has a different color. Um, I think I visualize the Gantt chart in my head because I'm just a visual person in general. Any new concept that I learn or any, even storytelling, I can see the story in my head that I'm
Mm-hmm.
sharing with someone. So I think it just sort of naturally falls into my head as these lovely, you know, colorful lines of, task one, task two, task three, task four. And there is something about all of the requirements kind of filter as far as like what might go first, just in a very like casual way. They slide back and forth on should this start with this one? No, we have like maybe 3 days that we need to have this task number one go on before task number two starts. Or does task number two really need to start right after task one? Can we slide it a little bit back? So I think a lot of that is sort of in my head. And if it's in my head, then it can be in a more physical manifestation in a document, whether that's on paper or probably in a Gantt chart in Excel. Let's be real. So I think if I don't see it in my head first, it's very hard for me to put it down on paper. So I don't know if that's just sort of like how my brain works and kind of an intuition thing because I know how to do that project. And so I know all of the various
Mm-hmm.
milestones and major tasks that need to happen that it kind of visualizes fairly easily in my head and then can go on paper and then things, of course, continue to move. Or if that's just, something I learned on the job. I don't really know where that came from, but that's kind of how it works.
And you mentioned earlier the concept of stacking, and that's what you're talking about with the slider bars of a Gantt chart. If someone from our audience hasn't seen a Gantt chart, maybe Google it now, but I think the whole audience has seen a Gantt chart. And you're saying that, tasks don't have to happen end to end. They can happen, one can happen starting at the same time because it needs to finish before another. There's some predecessor, successor relationships and things that are required. Did you learn stacking just trial by fire, trying to save time, move things around? Or was it the concept of, learning about that from your project management professional certification? Or how did that all come together for stacking a project plan?
I think I've kind of always done that. Not necessarily visualize the Gantt chart in my head, but like stack tasks. So
Mhm.
even if let's say I'm home and I know that I have to go in one room and get a thing and come back to the other room and get a thing, I make sure that I'm doing all of the things in the one room so I don't have to go back and forth. Like,
Mhm.
maybe I go to put the dog food bowl down for my dog to eat, but that's in the kitchen. So I know I'm going to pass the sink, and I can put that dirty dish that's on the table in the sink as I pass and then go in the I mean, it's just very
It's
like, I don't have to
constant.
because like, why? That's an extra 5 steps. That's just silly. So I I think that's just sort of always happened, which that makes me kind of sound a little bit crazy. Um, but I think translating into like the work environment, if there's a way that I can have things happen simultaneously so there's no downtime. I don't love downtime unless outside of work and I need some downtime. But at work, why would there be downtime?
We need to segue here from downtime because we need to talk about work life balance for you. Because I don't know about our audience, but listening to you talk about a Gantt chart in your head and how you're being so efficient, from one room to the next or from one task to the next, and that you want to keep these things moving and execute them without any wasted time, it doesn't feel very work life balance to me. And yet, you do a lot of things outside of work. We've talked about your involvement as a volunteer for the PMI LA chapter. How does that work life balance work for you?
I make it a point to stop work at a specific time.
Mhm.
That's usually 5 or 5:30 depending on what time maybe my last meeting is, and I'll write up some notes or, put a bow on whatever it is that I'm doing so that I feel like I can stop. Because I also don't like stopping in the middle, but I try to have like a very small window of I need to stop by, between X and X time. Because if I don't, it is very easy for me to sit at the computer to finish the thing, and that's not good because then it's 7:30 p.m. and I'm like, well, I need to be able to come down from work and decompress, but also be able to then pivot my brain to I need to sit down and work on, my capstone project for my master's degree, or maybe I need to
Mhm.
do some of the volunteer design work that I do for the local humane shelter. Or I have a dinner engagement with a friend, or whatever the other thing might be. Maybe it's the board meeting with PMILA. I take their minutes. That's my main volunteer for them. So
Nice.
I think turning off, it's a very just like change of also environment. I'm at my desk right now where I normally am for work. So if I'm not at work, I'm not at this desk. I don't sit here to do
Interesting.
almost anything else. So when I'm working
Good.
on my stuff for school or design, I am sitting on the couch, or I'm sitting at the kitchen table, or I'm just like physically in a different place, because
Mhm.
I find that having a very distinct physical place helps my brain disengage from what it was doing to what it's doing now. Like, for example, in my bedroom, I only sleep. I don't read. I don't watch TV. I go in there to sleep. Maybe it's a nap, but it is sleep time.
Mhm.
So I think that really helps to kind of like separate the rest of my life. And I like to do so many things that I know if I don't stop and carve out time for the other things that I like to do, I will get burnt out and not be a fun human to be around, and probably not do well at my job either. So I need that work life balance in order to be a better person at work.
And it seems like you are able to really wholeheartedly give yourself to these other pursuits. You're fully engaged in a master's degree certificate, you're fully engaged in your volunteer work, you're fully engaged at work. When you shut those down, it seems that you're more effective in those places. And you know what? The advice that you're giving is so simple. You know, get up and change your location for some of these different activities. But we've all kind of gotten in the habit to just doing everything everywhere. Work can find me in the car and it can find me at the grocery
Mhm.
store. And also, grocery shopping can find me at work. We have been blending that with phones and remote work and the way that we just kind of live right now. So I appreciate you talking about that. That is cool. I want to quick step over to, I guess, work at PayPal. I think the audience is clear that it's not a little company. We're at 27,000 employees, I think was the stat that I read from 2023. So, the Gantt chart that's in your mind and the project plan that, you have to keep track of for a small company or across a small team is usually pretty manageable. And even that can get complicated, right? We can't just keep it in our head. We put it on a spreadsheet, we put it in a project management tool, whatever. But now you have this growing company and there's many programs and many products and many initiatives and many teams all together. What is the challenge there for the project manager at a big company like PayPal with so many different teams and diverse teams, including diverse people? I think that's one of the mottos of your business model is to bring in as many diverse employees as you have customers.
I would say that probably 25 to 30% of every day is me checking in with people.
Mm,
All of my people. I have a network of people across product teams, accounting, legal, all of the cross-functional teams that I work with.
mm,
So it's just kind of like chatting over your fence to your neighbor. Oh, I'm working on this. Oh yeah, I'm, chopping down my tree today. Oh,
mhm.
I'm, building a
Yes.
fence. It's, I mean, they technically are
Yes.
overlapping each other.
Mhm.
One person's chopping down a tree that might be loud. It might fall in the other person's yard. So let's know about that. The other person's putting up a fence. Well, the other person probably wants to know because that might be loud or that might scare their dog or whatever it might be. So I
Right.
think just kind of having that knowledge and that awareness that other people's work will affect yours and your work will affect theirs, even if you're not working on a
Mhm.
project together, is one of the things that I make a point to do. And that way I have very good relationships cross functionally, even if I'm not working on a project with them. So building those relationships, I feel like is really one of the more important things that might not be high on the list in when you're learning project management per se. But as you develop your career, I think it's an important skill to have.
Yeah, we're hearing that, I think, more and more. In fact, our audience, if you haven't listened to the Fairlife episode, we just knocked that one out. And same kind of topic there about cross functional relationships and an empathy for other people's work and how your project impacts that. How does that change what they might have to do next based on what you're doing now?
I try to make sure that I'm contacting that individual in their preferred communication.
Right. I mean, there's no getting around it. Teams have different tools that they have to use, and you have to be able to connect on whatever tools it is that gets you to the right person.
And if you make it that much easier for someone else, they're going to be much more inclined to do the thing that you're asking them to do.
Yeah, from our perspective at Project Insight, when you're building a tool with functionality, you take into consideration that people are communicating on all those channels, right? And not only does it have to be simple to communicate on that channel, but then like your project management tool has to be able to turn that channel into something in project management. So turning a Teams message into a task or turning an assignment or an action item from a Slack message into a meeting minutes, and bringing files into those other platforms. It's great. It's neat that we can do that. It really helps work collaboration for sure. So the last thing before I let you go here, I need to give you a chance to really shine. Share with us some project that for your involvement in it really came together in a great way.
Yeah, I think I had one as soon as you said that. I was like, oh, I know.
Oh,
So
yay.
it was actually while I was at Herbalife. It was while I was doing some of their events, and we had a very big event in Singapore. We have one huge event every year. Thousands of people come. It's in a different country every year. Just huge event. The project was a I don't even remember what we called it, but I just called it a photo booth, which sounds really small and lame, but it was not. A whole bunch of um, photographers who came
Oh,
and did portraits
oh, wow.
for our distributors. And I think it was like 500 distributors had their
Wow.
photo taken over 3 days.
Wow.
So I may be getting my numbers mixed up. It is on my LinkedIn profile if anyone wants to just double check the
Nice.
numbers. Um, so it was a huge project, right? So we had to build a whole bunch of little mini studios for all of these people because you can't take 500 portraits over 3 days
No.
without having more than one photographer. So each photographer had their own assistant, had their own
Wow.
setup, there were lights, there was a background, there was a third person who was curating photos on the computer as they were being taken to then
Oh, wow.
show distributors
To kind of
afterwards
pick.
so that they could pick their top like 5 or 10 or whatever.
Okay.
They so that they would get those retouched, and then that would be,
Wow.
one of the things they got to take home after the event. So it was a very large job. There were a lot of moving pieces, very efficient because we had 2 couples at once, right? One looking, one getting their photos taken, and so
Yeah.
it was pretty good going through. There was still a line. We made sure there were nice places to sit and, because it's a very high-end event.
Yeah.
Our very distributors are invited to this event, and so
Gotcha.
they really get treated like royalty. I mean, they're the ones making the company money, so we're
Had to
definitely one
impress.
we wanna make sure that their experience is really great. So I it turned out amazing. Everybody loved it. They just thought it was the best thing ever. It was a lot, and we built every single studio, um, in another country. So I think that was really the final layer of complexity there because I had never seen the space in real life. Like, I'd seen photos, I saw the floor plan, like, we did all the measurements and everything, but making sure that everybody got there on time, that it got set up. Of course, things went wrong and this broke and we didn't have enough of that. And oh no, there's not enough, black drape for the background.
Super good.
I think that was the big one because it was in another country. It was very much like, well, I got there and I had 2 days to set up. I mean, obviously, I'm not doing all the things. It was
Right.
definitely a team effort, but I managed the whole project. So
Yes.
it was a lot, but it was probably one of the coolest projects, because everyone just had such a great time, and I think
Yeah.
seeing that that's one of the reasons I love events, is seeing people have so much fun at something
Mhm.
that you created, and then giving them something to take home with them so that they can always remember the experience they had.
Okay, so now I have to segue because I just had a great event at PMI Global Summit. I was there too, and you said the takeaway. So Lindy Way and I both have our Project Insight superhero mugs here. We were making these at the Global Summit. Oh yeah, can you go near? I can. Can you
I know,
see that it's
seriously,
actually
it's slower.
me? Mine's backwards. It looks like in my photo, but I think it's straight to you. But that's awesome. So we made superheroes of all of our project management professionals that stopped by the Project Insight booth at PMI Global Summit. Lindy Way was there. We got to meet. We turned her into a superhero. Now she's on her mug. And we would love to send every project manager who listens to our podcast one of our superhero mugs. I'll put the link in the show notes below. So check it out if you'd like to get your own mug. All of us who are event planners should really like this episode. Just like it. Just hit the like button, send Lindy Way a great comment because it's more work than just,
Mhm.
these are my ideas and I need to order these things. I mean, we all know that you're doing it in the dark, you have no visibility. There's so many moving parts. There's so many people that are going to change contacts. You're going to miss this deadline. They're going to say they don't have this thing when you thought they did. I mean, there's so many pivoting things and events that it could make any person who doesn't like changes just lose their mind. So you have to be able to pivot as an events person. And to me, your Gantt chart in your head and your time ninja and your gathering requirements is just the perfect culmination of superpowers to execute something that big in another country, well, on time, on budget, with happiness. So congratulations to you. That's really great. Well done. Bravo. Thank you for joining us today with our guest, Lindy Way Stenberg. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, or leave us a comment. By subscribing to our YouTube channel or following us on Spotify, Apple, or your other favorite podcast channels, you'll receive notification of any new episodes. We'd also appreciate you sharing Wear Your Cape to Work with your network of project professionals or anyone else who you think might enjoy the show. If you're not already following Project Insight on social media, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, using the links in the show notes. Our website is projectinsight.com and has tons of resources for project professionals like you, including free PDU webinars. If you'd like to try our software, we offer free plans all the way up to enterprise solutions to help you grow as you go in your project management journey. You can message our sales and success teams directly on the website, or you can sign up for a demonstration or consultation there as well. I'll leave all those links in the show notes. Thank you once again for joining today's conversation, and most importantly, thanks for wearing your cape to work.